Okay, this is TEAS Mock English version 4. I will aim to make this mock as quick as possible. By the time you get to mock 4, you've seen at least a couple of others. I'm kind of always switching around the order of these, but you've definitely seen a few of the scenarios that you saw here in a couple of other mocks. So I will make sure to point out the class that everything came from, wherever that's applicable, and then the category that everything is in. I won't go out of my way to super explain most of these unless they don't have a typical explanation in some way. So if you have questions on anything specific, send them to me. The goal here is most of you who are doing this one are very close to the end of your plan, or you're on a secondary plan, you're in a hurry. So my goal will be mostly to get you the answers and a place to go back and look or review if you have issues. So send me a picture or a question if you don't know the rationale for one of them. I'll do my best to do a quick one. So question 1, I'm going to use a paper copy so that I can see if I have any explanations here, is from English 1. This would be considered a clarity question. Which sentence is correct? This would be clarity or correctness. What determines the answer to this question is that it starts with the word while, which is a conjunction. Anytime that a sentence starts with a conjunction, the middle-ish of the sentence will have a comma, because there will be a dependent clause and there will be an independent clause. So the correct way to punctuate that is going to be choice B. Question 2 is from English 2. This is kind of an expanded version of formal and informal language. Right now I am making a lot of corrections, or revamping, I guess is a better way to put it, with my curriculum to expand on some of the things that are just beginning to roll out with the new questions that are coming out on the TEAS. The TEAS has been out for almost 3 years. The 6 has been out for almost 3 years. They're just starting to make some questions that are a little bit harder. And so if you took the old version of English 2, this particular formal language question might have been harder than what you feel like you studied. If you take the newer version of it, which will be rolling out pretty quickly after this particular mock gets recorded, you probably did see this. The big defining factor here is, in this particular question, is the word some. So one of the things we talk intensively in class about is the contractions. So you can never ever have a formal sentence if there's a contraction used. So that takes A out. And you definitely learned that no matter when you took your English 2 class. The other sentences that are wrong in this instance have some used in various ways that causes the sentence to be informal in all different cases. So we need to find some ways, or we should discuss some problems. The way they use the word should here is also a bit informal. And they used some a couple of times in that particular sentence in choice C. So all of those make those sentences A, B, and C less formal than D. And there's a lot of those. If you took the intense review class, you definitely saw that first got rolled out there. If you end up taking the new version of English 2, you'll see a lot of different instances of that. There's a lot of words that cause something to be considered informal. Some is definitely one of the things. It's a relative word. It conveys a lack of confidence to use the word some. And in this instance, it causes choices B and C to convey a very relative impression when we're trying to convey an exact impression, and that causes D to be the most formal. Formal sentence is always going to be relative to what your choices are. Always scan and make sure you take out anything that's got a contraction, because that makes it super easy to just take that off the table right off the bat. And then whatever's left, see if there's anywhere that they use words or phrases, or they organize their sentence or anything in a way that seems like it's less formal. And it might even be instinctive in some cases where one of the sentences just feels less formal than another. It's something like this if you're picking up on that. 3 is going to be from English 2. This is quote punctuation. When you do quote punctuation, you want to go straight to the places that you know there is something important happening. So all of these are the exact same sentence, and where we need to go is here is my first spot. So there should be a comma there. You can't have Jay asked Jen and then not have punctuation there. You can't have a period there. This is a dependent clause, and there needs to be a comma right there. So that would take out D automatically. This is the beginning of the person who's asking the question's sentence. So there has to be a capital in the beginning of the spoken question. So that would take out A. And then at the end of the question, the spoken part, the quote, is the thing that is a question. So our question mark should be inside the quote, not outside. And that's going to leave us with B being the correct answer. 4 is from English 1 in a sense. So is 5. Those are from the spelling and word meaning, the list that's included with English 1. So we don't ever really talk about the spellings and word meanings. You just see them throughout the mocks. Incredulous is circulating a whole lot right now, and they are using distrusting as the definition of incredulous. And then patron would most closely mean a customer or somebody who is loyal in some way to something, but typically a customer who is paying for something. 6 is from English 2, talking about apostrophes. Always kind of scan when it says which one is correct on using apostrophes. Kind of scan across to see where all they're using them. So you'll see that in some sentences there's one there, there, there. The only 2 places that are appropriate to have them in this instance is with patients and nurses. You do not need one on duties, and the correct answer is going to be C. So make sure you're ready to use possessive punctuation on plural and singular words. Make sure you know all of those differences, and that you know not only should I use possessive or not, but also do I put an ES, do I put an S, do I put an apostrophe on the outside or the inside, and all of that. Number 7 is from English 2, which just demonstrates the correct quote punctuation. Again, there's places that we specifically need to go and look. So in this case, we have 2 different questions that are being, actually we have one question being asked, which is here. And then we have a statement being made, which is here. We interrupt in the middle to do the attribution that goes with it. So this person who's speaking, first they asked a question, why didn't you go to the meeting? The narrator stops to say he asked her, and then the same person begins speaking again. We discussed a lot of important information. The question mark needs to be inside of this quote because that was a question. So if you see anywhere where it's outside, or like here, we have major problems because the quote is on the outside of the attribution. Here we don't have a quote at the beginning of the attribution, so there's some areas where there's major issues. And then we need a period here because then we're going to start up a whole new sentence. Both of the quotes in this instance should start with a capital because it's the beginning of the person who is speaking's sentence. In this case, the correct one is going to be C. That one might have seemed easy because there's a couple of them that are just really messed up. But then when you get down to the final couple of answers, be very careful about the weird little details, because a lot of times they use that strategy where they make 2 of them really silly, and then the other 2, you can almost not tell a difference between them. 8 is from English 2, correctly using apostrophes again. A is going to be the correct answer there. They've is using an apostrophe for a contraction. She's is using it as she is. And then her mom's car, mom is singular, and mom is in possession of the car. 9 is from English 3, subject-verb agreement. I lightened up the content from English 3 for this mock because lately in the last several months, there's not a lot showing up as far as the rotation of the question types from English 3, which is great news because English 3 is definitely probably the hardest. So there's not a lot of subject-verb agreement. If you do get a question or two over it, they will be kind of tricky. So you still need to be using the strategy where you identify the category that they fit in, and you figure out, once you identify that, if each one is following the rules for its individual category. But you'll see that there's not as many of them. So on this one, when I look at A, I see that it's a situation where I have multiple subjects and I have an and. And if I have an and, that's going to join all of my subjects together. So no matter what, this is functioning as they. So they would be watch television, not watches. There's no way to have two subjects with an and not have a they. That will always make a they. Measles is a serious condition is the one that's correct because measles is a name. It's not plural. It's a singular word, so it is a serious condition. The cat or the dog, so now we have two subjects and we have an or. So when you have or, you go to the subject that is closer to the verb and you essentially ignore the other one. So the dogs would be run. Since the dogs is plural, the dogs run through the yard, so that makes C incorrect. Everybody is one of the singular quantity words, so it gets used like it's the word she. She enjoys a good movie, so that would make that one wrong. 10 is from mocks pretty much exclusively. This is one of those easier questions about the writing process. Final stages of the writing process, you're almost always going to see proofreading as being the one that they want there. If it's a very early writing process, it's usually going to be like brainstorming or drafting, depending on how they describe it. This proofreading is definitely the one that you will typically see if they ask about the writing process. 11 is from English 1, which is second person voice. Second person is either at you or to you. At you would not actually say you, but it would be clearly language directed at the reader. So it would be instructing you or talking at you. In this case, that would be A, because there's not a he or she or I, it's talking to you specifically. 12 and 13 are both part of exactly the same type of thing. It comes from English 1. This is where we're identifying parts of speech, but we have an introductory dependent clause that's going to impact where our subject is. So in both of these cases, our subject is here. So these two have different dependent clauses, but remember that anytime there's a dependent clause here, we are not going to consider this. Basically, we're not going to consider anything that precedes the comma as having a subject with it. So Jeremy is the subject of the sentence, and then in this particular instance, felt would be our verb. And same with this one, felt would be our verb. Question 12 asks you to identify the subject, so that would be Jeremy. It's not his because his is in the dependent clause. And then on 13, it asks us what action is being taken by the subject. So if the subject is Jeremy right here, Jeremy felt. So that's going to be C for each of those. The subject is Jeremy, and the verb that the subject is taking is felt. 14 is from English 1. Also, it's a misplaced modifier question. This is one of the ones that is a specific misplaced modifier. They want to know exactly which part of the sentence is misplaced. Depending on which of the things I described to you, you ended up gravitating toward. Some of you chose the easy way. Once you learned this and practiced it a couple of times, it's typically the very last possible fragment that you can choose. So where it belongs in this case is the last possible fragment you can choose. If you don't like to do it that way and that feels a little too rocky for you, the way we want to do it is look at each one of them and decide which one can be moved by moving it earlier into the sentence, by moving it up, so that we don't create a gap by moving something from earlier to later. So the nurse moved the water to the table from the windowsill. If we were to move, let's say, for example, we take water to the table, or moved the water, since that's not one of our answers, moved the water. If we take that and we move it this way, we've just created a giant gap in our sentence. So now to fix that, we have to move this up, and then we create a gap there, and we have to move that up, and we have to move that up, and so on. And now we have to move pretty much everything in the sentence to fix that. That would not give us anything different than just taking this very last fragment and moving it to where it was supposed to be. So whether you chose to remember that by remembering to move something upward, or whether you chose to remember that it's the last fragment, those misplaced modifiers are very easy to pinpoint because there's a very particular strategy that always gets used with those. So that one is D. Number 15 is from English 2. Which of the following is a compound sentence? And that one is going to be A, because it has but I. So a compound will have a coordinate conjunction followed by a subject, or it will have a semicolon. It will have one of those two things. 16, also from English 2, sentence structures. What's an example of a simple sentence? That one is going to be A, because it has and, which is a coordinate. So it'll have a coordinate, but not followed by a subject. So you can't have a subject after a coordinate because that would make it compound. So and could not is a simple sentence. Which of the following is a complex sentence? So 17 is also from English 2. This one is going to need a subordinate conjunction in order to be complex, and the one that's got a subordinate is A. Make sure that you know that process. Obviously, I did not just explain out that whole process, but you should have that process down where you look for fragments, then you look for subordinates, then you look for coordinates, then you identify what's after the coordinate. You always go in that order. You always do all of those things, and you should actually be able to recite those steps as quickly as I just did. So what I just said should have been something that you knew and you just totally followed me, even though I said that ridiculously quick. If you have that down, these 3 questions will be a piece of cake for you, and you will get 2 or 3 questions over that. So those can very easily be free points if you just follow that process. It always works that way. There's no exceptions. If you memorize that process and you implement that process, you'll always get those questions right. 18 is from English 2, formal language. This one, we have 2 that have contractions. So A and B are out because of contractions. And then that leaves us with 2 very different sounding sentences. So it's pretty obvious that C is the one that's a lot more formal of the 2. And then this one has we should, and should tends to be less formal because, again, it lacks confidence. It sounds tentative. And then some also lacks confidence and sounds tentative. Between the 2 of them, That sounds like something that you would say to your sibling or your friend a lot more so than it sounds like something you would say to a nursing professor. So that is going to be C for the most formal. 19 is something you've seen in your mocks, particularly mock 3, where we're going to put sentences in logical order. The logical order on this is A. I'm not going to read these sentences for time's sake. What I'm going to say is there should always be an intro sentence, and it will list what's going to be in the other sentences, and it will list them in order. So there's two pieces to this photograph. There's positioning and there's lighting. Then we go hunt down positioning. We find that sentence that's about positioning. It's possible that there could be two different sentences about positioning. We hunt them both down. So if there's another one, we put them both there. There won't be a specific order if there's two of them. There will only be one way to do it. And then we go hunt down lighting. And then we find our conclusion sentence, and it should be easy to find. In this case, it says, now that you understand the importance of the two things, and it's very obviously the conclusion sentence. So you have an intro that brings in the 2 or 3 things that you're going to talk about. You follow the order it's in. You find the sentence about positioning first. You find the sentence about lighting second. And then you go and you find the exit sentence that concludes and reiterates. 20 is from English 1. This would be considered a fluency question, which is where we're trying to combine sentence parts into one sentence or a bunch of sentence fragments into 2 sentences in some instances. Be very careful with these instructions, because there are instances where it says one sentence, and you might actually see an answer that's 2 sentences and it sounds fabulous. And then there's another answer that's 1 sentence and it sounds cumbersome. It's a little much for 1 sentence. If the instructions say 1 sentence, it has to be 1 sentence. So they'll trick you by putting a little bit too much for a sentence, but saying that you have to do it that way. In this instance, it works as 1 sentence in the case of A. If it did not say 1 sentence, then you are not limited to that. Both of these exist. So if it doesn't say 1 sentence, do what you think really sounds the best. If it says 1 sentence, find the best that is within 1 sentence. This one was only 2 pieces, so this blended together nicely. You might have one that's 5 pieces, and definitely refer back to and study back through the pieces in your fluency packet from English 1 to make sure you're used to combining those. Look back through there to see that sometimes your instructions said 1, sometimes they said to just combine them, but they did not specify 1, so that you're used to that. 21 is from English 1. It says, which sentence is the clearest? And this one is going to be A. The dented car was parked in the salvage lot. There's a lot of different ways to do these clarity. Hopefully by now you have figured out your style. We don't want to do what B does, where we're leading off with in the salvage lot. We don't want to lead off with the dented car in the salvage lot was parked. And we don't want to start out with parked. We want to start with our subject when it's possible to do that. And then we want to give our verb, and then we want to give our location, if at all possible. All of the remaining questions are from English 1. They're all clarity or correctness questions. 22, the one that's going to be correct is A. While I was away, several messages were left at my house. This one is correctness. So it's just a matter of there's a conjunction there. We need a comma to separate our dependent from our independent. 23 is a clarity question, which is the clearest. That one is going to be A. The red barn on the corner was full of brown horses. So we don't want to lead off with full of horses. We don't want to lead off with the red barn, because then it sounds weird later when we say located on the corner. So that is this particular mock is one question shy of what the actual English test is, and I don't even know how that ended up happening as far as the ratio. You can send me a message to have me put that in ratio to what the English number is. The previous mocks that you did are a little bit longer than the English test, and I do that to get you more practice on certain things, higher ratios of certain things like subject-verb agreement. So if you have any questions, if you want to know what would my score possibly be with the potential curves up or down, if you have questions on one of these answers and how we got to it, anything like that, let me know. If you've never taken it and have any interest in taking it, there is an English 1 through 3 intense review class. Many of you who are seeing this mock have taken that. If you have not and you want to do a lot of review for English, or you want to get better at English, that is a fabulous class for mastering everything on a level that you can master it when you've heard all of this before and you want to study it in another way and you want to get deeper into these skills. So that is an option. If you want to get better at this type of thing, you can do that and then continue on with mock versions 5 and 6 and 7 and so on. So let me know if there's anything that I can clarify or help with, and then let me know what you did score either way. And I will see you guys later.